All right. Star Trader, yeah. Yay. Okay, that was painful. The thing is, this game is terribly, terribly flawed. At the same time, it's also an absolutely brilliant idea that almost works. It takes a few little tweaks, and I went over a few of them. There's an off by one error that happens that I don't think there's a way around with the markets. But you can live with that. There are a few other modifications. You don't have to make most of them. And most games you don't have to make any of them. But if you're playing the corporate game, or if somebody's trying to do piracy or something, some of the timing issues don't work right the way they're set up. But other than that, it's still terribly broken. And it's terribly broken largely because of the concept that the events drive, whether or not you can win. It really just comes up to, hey, when a particular event comes out, that gives you the opportunity to win. You don't have really any opportunity otherwise. And I went into reasons for that in the wrap. Essentially, the markets balance out in such a way, and the players are trying to cut their margins so thin that it'll take forever to end the game. I mean, you come out with a positive amount of money over time. It's not that it will never end, but it's that nobody would want to play it for as long as it takes to play out. Usually, after 8 hours, 10 turns, whatever, it's time to pack this thing in, right? For the modern gamer, you may not want to do it because there's a bit of paperwork. Again, for a one-day game, this is a lot of paper to go through. I don't know what I got here, 40 sheets or something? Who knows? Components, well, you got your paper map, which mine has gotten so messy. A lot of charts and information are on it. It's gotten so bad mine, because I've played this a decent amount and transported an even greater amount, that I had to tape it up, and that makes it so that now it's not playable with the map without a piece of plexiglass over it, just to prevent it from breaching. Counters, the actual counters are fine, although the ship counters I find a little confusing when there's a lot of ships in the game. That's why I had to pull out ship counters from a different game, just to match the colors so that you know who's got what ships. But overall, there just aren't enough counters for the commodities, for the warehouses, whatever. And, this is the design limitation of a magazine game. Now, this is a Nick Karp game. Nick Karp's done 3 games that he's credited with over at Board Game Geek. His first one was Rescue from the Hive, which is a pretty cool little science fiction, tactical, on-board the spaceship type game. It's actually pretty decent. It's got some really innovative ideas in it. And, this guy was really young when he did these, right? And Star Trader, which, like I said, I think this is brilliant. It draws heavily on, I'm going to say, the business management tradition, but there's a series of a few games that draw on that, including probably the most fun of them is Executive Decision, where you're just doing the bidding on commodities and then producing goods. And I really have to get that played, but I don't think I have a copy here. Although I may have, because it is one of my favorites. And then the third game, and this is just, his magnum opus, I think he was away in grad school while he wrote this, was Vietnam, which is just, sort of the gold standard for covering the Vietnam War in a huge amount of detail. I'll get it back on video at some day. I did an intro to it. Before I started doing game videos, really, I was in the midst of playing it and just said, hey, I want to show some of my friends online what I do and what my love is. And now, now there's all kinds of that stuff online from me. But, yeah, there's not really a hell of a lot more I can say about it I think the system is absolutely brilliant. The idea of taking that commodities and bidding market from the business management, from executive decision, and translating it into a situation where you actually have to pick up and deliver the goods, where you're building, where you're dealing with factories, where you're dealing with warehouses, where you've got multiple different commodities to play in, where there's possibility of piracy, combat, there's some skullduggery you can do, there's special agents. There's just so much in this, so much chrome and so much stuff. And to tell you the truth, a lot of it doesn't get used, like the agents. I pulled a couple of them, but then it's kind of like, well, they're kind of expensive. The opportunity chits, where you have this right to like go deal with illegal commodities. Now they're kind of weird because they're not really affected by market pressures, but they do provide a certain exit valve. So if the game's too tight and you have the opportunity to use some of those, you might be able to make money where you couldn't make money off normal runs. Normally when I've played, they're too risky. And we saw that even here with people who are kind of configured to take advantage of them, like Ian Flash Corp in my game, with streamlined ships and this, that, and the other. It's still too risky. You need to go full illegal for that to really work well. And then if you do that, you're cut out of so many markets with those ships. You can't store anything on those ships. Like you can't store the weapons pods or whatever if you decide to not go with like a dagger, or if you decide to go with one of the non-military hulls so that you can trade with something else. Well, you can't, because you've got your Battlecom pod, and that's going to get you in trouble. So there could be some tweaking there. One of the biggest things that affects me, though, is just those events. There's 2 or 3 events that really can be big game changers. Maybe a few more that can be game changers, but there's like 2 that can win you the game if they come up and you're aware of them. And they become a possibly known commodity, in which case, if everybody's kind of aware of them, then somebody starts taking actions that match one of those events, then everybody knows about it. And because of the way the timing of the investment phase works, at least, everybody can kind of pile on and get into it. The other side of it is, if people aren't aware of them, you're just playing a crapshoot. You don't know. It's going to end when somebody gets lucky and sees an event and capitalizes on it fully. And that's really a shame. Now, to some extent, though, the game itself actually says, hey, you don't have to stick to this map and these 4 commodities. You've got the whole universe to play in. Grab a few planets that you've designed yourself, figure out their commodities, because the universe has this tremendous system for generating planets and what resources they have available. And then just, run your own little trading world there. And you can make your own events, and, you can play with different ships that are available here. There's more hulls there, although, I don't know, this may be close to the full hull list, actually. But that's a significant amount of work, right? People are buying this maybe thinking, oh, this is a great game, I remember this about it. But it doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up as a competitive exercise particularly well. It's something cool to look at, to play with, and then say, wow, with a little bit more work, maybe I could get something that works better. But then it's hard to see the way forward. It's just a matter of the way people are going to run their businesses. They're going to run them so that they can kind of starve out their opponents, I think. And if you don't do that, then whoever you're not starving out, whichever little group is working together to keep prices inflated or whatever for their own purposes, well, they're just going to get an advantage on that. And that's all that there is to it. This doesn't have any kind of weird things in it. So like Silverton's market is kind of goofy. It's like, all right, the prices start rising, and you just let them rise, and then you dump a huge amount of stuff on the market. Here it doesn't work that way. You can let the prices rise and trickle stuff into the market, and it won't depress the prices too much. But if you dump a lot of stuff on it, it depresses the prices immediately. It does that in Silverton and a lot of other market games. But in those games, usually you collect the full value, which is not realistic. With a few little tweaks to this game, you can get a very, very good idea of how markets more or less work. You know, it's not like, gee, yes, we cornered the silver market and now we can sell it all at top value. No, you can't. You really can't. If you do corner a market, the idea then is that you slowly feed the stuff that you bought and raised the price with back out and hope that you make a margin overall. And if you do it carefully, you really can. And that works in this game. The problem, of course, is that you can't really corner the markets very easily. Now, using the military capabilities in the game, you might be able to. The particular game I played had one little problem with that, which is that there was somebody with the best military ship you can pretty much have already on the board with no capacity for trading. Now, maybe he could have come up with a deal and said, hey, you and I are going to win the game. I'll blockade the market and you give me this much money, you know, or you give me this share of the profits. It's about half. And they could both make their way through. With the game that I played, which has preset corporations, that's kind of hard to judge, because what you have to do then is say, well, okay, but, you know, we can't just split it 50-50 here, because your victory conditions are different from mine, and you can just, you know, we both want a shot at winning, right? So we've got to balance it more, not so much on what we're doing for each other, but what we want in the end. It doesn't, and it wouldn't be a very fun game for everyone else. I don't know if it would be terribly fun for the two players who are running away with it. Usually collusion like that just sucks for everyone. So anyway, as a model to kind of explore different options, the design itself is really, really interesting. As a game that's designed on that model, it just doesn't quite work. It ends up being either a really significant luck fest or something that just doesn't feel very correct anymore because you've memorized the events and you're trying to take advantage of those. So for example, if you know inflation is a criminal 3 in 3 turns or whatever it is, well, there's maybe 2 of them in the game, right? And you could just buy your criminal up to 3, make sure you look at those 2 events, not worry about anything else criminal if you're not worried about that. And likewise with the other one, the General War, which is a much harder one to unearth. You can memorize its signature and then prepare for it. Even if you don't buy the ability to access the event and then buy the event itself, you can have a pretty good idea of whether or not that's that event. And that's a matter that, well, okay, if you could game master this game and like set it up for people, that would be very cool. What might be really awesome is to do a computerized version of this where everybody's walking into a market they don't fully understand. I don't think most of the computerized, you know, space merchant type games do a very good job of providing a market that makes sense. One of the things that's great about a board game, though, is you can see the mechanisms that are at work and you can watch them operating. And here, you can watch them operating and say, yeah, you know, I have pretty good confidence to a point, right? But I can't just, you know, I can't say, well, this is an excellent economic model, but it's a fairly good one for something that you're going to sit down and play for fun, right? Anyway, that's probably where it's got its strongest point, is that it actually, tries to present you with this really good economic model that for a game, but it's not quite good enough. It's got a few little flaws, and then it also just doesn't work well as a game. Now, it doesn't have the stupid shit that if you saw me play Business Strategy, which is business management, updated as of like 1972 or whatever. What you'll see with that game, if you watch the playthrough on that, is that corporations did things that they very seldom do. I'm not going to say they never do it. They do it when they're trying to drive other corporations out and gain a monopoly situation. And it became this completely destructive situation where everybody involved in it is just on a race for the bottom. And the question is, can you outbid and run your company just a little better so it would be the last to collapse, basically. You don't see that here in general. And the reason for that is there are enough different opportunities and enough different ways that you can go about competing that you're not stuck in one channel where you're like, and executive decision has this same problem as business strategy, except you're not paying, you don't have fixed costs in executive decision. So in this game, there's enough possibilities that you can say, okay, that market's not working for me, I'm going to shift to another one. And you have that flexibility to do that because you're mainly just shipping stuff rather than, some kind of physical plant that's trying to produce things. So it's kind of nice that it gives you a more realistic view of how the economics would work in this kind of situation. And it actually gives you a fairly realistic view, other than that if you take the events out of it, in terms of if they're not unknown items, if people know those events, they're going to play a little bit outside of what you'd expect corporations to be doing. Because, I don't know, they're looking at the marked cards, essentially. But yeah, I really, there's something about this game that I really love, but it's frustrating as hell when you actually start playing it, because you start to realize how much is wrong with it as a game. I look at it as, at this point, if I was looking to buy this and didn't already have it, I think it's for the person who wants to say, you know what, I want to have that best economic model, but I want to try to make something better out of it, because something that's fun as a game at the same time, and that meets that kind of competitive requirement. And I'm not going to say this isn't fun. When I bring this to new players, they usually do enjoy playing, or when I did back in the days when people didn't mind this, they usually did enjoy it until boom, it's over. Look, somebody won because they they knew that event and took full advantage of it, and were just able to turn it. And also, as you saw if you watched the playthrough, once the margins get too small, it starts to look like it is just going to go on forever and ever and ever. And, I'm kind of glad those events started coming. I don't know if I would have been able to bail from a game of this. I did eventually, once it was clear who was going to take the advantage. But it would be very hard sitting there watching people slowly advancing and just saying, wow, this is going to take like 100 more turns, And the turns take a long time because of all the paperwork. A lot less when you're playing with less people. The corporate game is tougher in terms of the paperwork and the effort you have to put in than the sort of generic game where everybody starts off with, I don't know what it is, a couple $100 a ship, and they're kind of floating off on their own. And that's what I usually bring to people when I'm playing it opposed. First of all, because they're in a balanced situation. I don't believe that the multiplayer stuff, that the corporations are balanced at all. Although maybe they are more than I think. So I look at McCready. I thought they couldn't win. Well, with a little analysis, they could win on the first turn with some luck, and with a couple lucky shots, they came within, probably a die roll, 1 pip on a die roll that could have won them the game. 1 pip on a couple of die rolls. If they had gotten a better roll on either of those ships by a little bit that they sold at the end of the game, they would have won. They were only $20 or something short of the victory out of the 1,800 they needed. Some of the victory conditions aren't as reasonable as other ones, although if Quasar, the guy who eventually won the game, had taken an all-money victory condition, he probably would have been able to win right away off the inflation event, whereas he wasn't able. He had to get some market manager positions and such. But nothing was going to stop that. We were also close with another player, so there were like 3 people who were in the running out of the 6. One person got knocked out, but he got knocked out because he flew into a place where he was getting shot up by McCready. So yeah. Anyway, it was interesting to look at it again. There's a reason that I've kind of, I guess, been dreading playing this. So even though I remember it fondly, it does not live up to the expectations that I had. The only times that I think I've really, really enjoyed it is playing it opposed. And the secret bidding and stuff like that. I can make do through stuff like that when I'm playing solo. But then add to that the tedium factor of trying to work through every turn, just the amount of paperwork, the amount of effort put in, and then not seeing much come of it all. But again, there's something brilliant to this that I'm very glad to own it in the sense that, I'm glad to have experienced it a number of times and to have investigated as much as I have over. When I first got it a few times, but then more in a later period where I was trying to get people to play more interesting and different games. And this is really one of the few economic models that I feel works. It's not as detailed maybe as business strategy was in terms of being able to take out loans and stuff. It's not as detailed a situation in terms of how the loans are handled, in terms of depreciation and stuff like that you claim in that game. But in terms of sort of the core of the economics of it, yeah, it makes more sense. Because again, unless you're looking at a price war, business strategy just does not make sense. Corporations try to make money. They don't try to consistently destroy everyone else. And if you're in a market where a monopoly wouldn't be possible in business strategy, someone else would start up a corporation immediately, making the same stuff that you do. And in this, if you tried to play a completely destructive game, well, people would just sell their ships and kind of figure out a way to make money using one of the other pathways. As it is, there's already 4 commodities you can play in, so you're going to have to blast all 4 of them. And then, even if you do that, reputation gets you money, possibility of illegal goods, passengers, which we didn't see at all because of the piracy. It's just too dangerous. And you can build factories, and they'll pay themselves off eventually, especially if the commodity is down at 1 when you buy it. Even if you plus then there's like, as you get market position, the contractor, the market manager. Well, the contractor is the big one. the market's not so good, but yeah, I'll buy 5 of those. The price is going to go up later, the warehousing and all that. You can work that all out. And then also doing bad things to people, or better yet, threatening to do bad things to people in order to get bribes. And we saw a fair amount of that happening too. Anyway, it's such a hard game to even rate. I don't know what I've given it as a rating, a 7 or an 8, because it's such a brilliant attempt, or should it just get like, you know, a 1 because it's essentially broken? Well, probably I'm more inclined to give it that 7 or an 8 because I really do respect this game a lot. But I don't really enjoy playing it solo very much, and I would not want to bring it to people who know the game for the simple fact that in most groups, unless they're people like me, and I've had a couple of friends like that, in most groups they would try to optimize their knowledge of the event chits and stuff. And I think that playing under those circumstances is no fun at all. So I don't know what I'd do, though, because, you know, I know, right? I mean, the best thing would be to run the game and maybe redesign it myself, you know, not because this is particularly flawed as this particular implementation, so much as just to make sure that nobody knows the events, and then not play it so that I don't know them, just, you know, show it to other people. Anyway, that's what I got to say, I guess.